Hey everyone. So this video is going to be kind of a little refresher on some of the work we did with metric measurements. Now, there are three types of measurements we're going to be focusing on. Measuring length, measuring mass, which is, some people could say it's the same thing as weight. It's not quite the same thing, but it's close. You know, if you want to, you can kind of think of them as cousins. And then volume, which is how much space something takes up. And we usually use that in measuring liquids. All right, so for each of these, there is what is called a base metric unit. That is a unit of measurement that is the basic unit for the entire metric system. And everything else is either a multiple of this unit or it's a fraction of this unit. So the base unit for length is what is called a meter. Now, if you try to get an idea of what a meter is a length maybe somewhat close to kind of a yard. It's probably a little smaller than that, or right around that size. But if you've seen a meter stick, obviously that's 1 meter. All right, the unit for mass is called a gram. All right, and a gram is very, very small. Think of a paperclip. Picture holding one in your hand, and the weight from that, the mass of that, is a gram. So that is 1 gram right there. And then the base measurement for volume was what's called a liter. Now, liters are a little harder to describe. If you're going to the grocery store and you've seen the big bottles of soda, not the ones that you just drink individually, but like the big ones that you put in the fridge and you pour like a cup out of, those are called 2-liter bottles. So if you picture half of that, that's about a liter. All right. Now, everything else in the metric system is based on prefixes that change the meaning of the measurement. For example, we add a prefix to the base measurement, and it means either a multiple of that measurement or it means a fraction of that measurement. So we're going to go with start with the largest types of measurements that we're going to be using, and that is using the prefix kilo. Now, kilo, if we put it in front of meter, makes kilometer. And what does it mean? It means times 1,000. That means a kilometer is 1,000 meters. It's 1,000 meters. Picture there was that meter stick that I mentioned before, and 1,000 of them basically end to end. Okay? Now, we could do the exact same thing for mass. If we add kilo to gram, that means, let me fix that. That means, again, times 1,000. So 1 kilogram is 1,000 grams. And then with volume, if I add kilo to liter, I end up with what's called a kiloliter. And that, of course, means 1,000 liters. So how many liters are in a kiloliter? Well, 1,000. Now, the next prefix we're going to work with is, you could apply it to any of these, but we're just going to use it with the length unit, the meter, and that is centi. And centi is less than the base unit, which means it means a fraction. And if we put centi in front of meter, we get centimeter. Get it? I mean, that's how we get the word centimeter. Centimeter. And what does centi mean? Centi means 1 out of 100. In other words, if we were to take a full meter and break it up into 100 pieces, then we get a centimeter. So, thinking of that meter stick and dividing it up into 100 equal pieces, each one of those pieces would be 1 centimeter. So how many centimeters are in a meter? Well, there's 100 centimeters in every meter. All right, now we could do the same thing with grams and liters, but you're not going to really encounter those, so we're not going to worry about it. Instead, we're just going to move on to the last prefix that you're going to need to know, and that is milli. And as you can see, I'm kind of making a trend here. Like you kind of see how they are related to each other. Like kilometers is greater than a meter is greater than a centimeter, and a centimeter is greater than, what do we get if we put milli in front of meter? We get millimeter, and milli means 1/1000th. So again, think of that meter stick and it being broken up into 1,000 equal pieces, and each one of those then is a millimeter. And so how many millimeters does it take to make up a meter? Well, it takes 1,000 pieces to make up the whole meter. So 1,000 millimeters goes into 1 meter. And you will be seeing this with grams, so that would be called a milligram. Means the exact same thing. And that's the thing. These, no matter what you see them on, these prefixes mean the exact same thing. So a milligram is 1/1000th of a gram. So how many milligrams go into a gram? Well, 1,000. And then lastly, milliliter. And again, that means 1/1000th. And so how many milliliters go into a liter? Well, 1,000. So you can kind of see how easy it is to interpret what each of these mean, as long as you understand that you've got your 3 base units. You've got your meter, your gram, and your liter. Then you've got your prefixes like kilo, which means 1,000 of that base unit. Centi, which means 1 out of 100 parts of that base unit. And milli, which means 1 out of 1,000 parts of that base unit. So they all revolve around the base unit, which is why I was talking about so much about the base units. So how do we apply this to an actual problem? Well, let's look at this example. We've got 2 4/10 meters, and we are going to convert that into centimeters. So the first thing to do is take our 2 4/10. We're going to rewrite that, and we're going to turn this into an equation. Now, when we are converting between metric measurements, we're either going to be multiplying or dividing by powers of 10. What are powers of 10? Well, basically 10, 100, or 1,000. It can go higher, but that's all we're going to be worrying about. So the first question is, do we multiply or divide here? And there's a pretty simple rule. If we are, let's take a look back at our chart here. All right, so we look at the chart here, and the chart says we are going from meters to centimeters. Now, if you want to kind of picture it, think of the meter as like a box, okay? So we know in the example that we just had, that we've got about 2 4/10 boxes. And let's think of something that's in the box. Doesn't really matter what. But we know, since there's 100 centimeters in each meter, that's basically saying that there's 100 pieces in each box. So if I'm going from meters to centimeters, I'm basically taking all those items out of the box and counting them. And that is multiplication. So that means I'm going to need to multiply. If I'm going from a bigger unit, and you know this one's bigger because it is higher up on this chart, to a smaller one, again, I'm going from a big box to all the smaller pieces inside, I am going to be multiplying. So we're going to multiply. And what are we going to multiply by? Well, how many pieces were in that box? How many centimeters are in a meter? Well, that would be 100. And just like we said, Like I've said before, you can use a calculator for this, but let's say, for example, that you don't want to. Okay, let's say that you want to be a little adventurous here and you just want to figure this out. Now, you could sit there and go, 2 and 4/10 times 100, okay? But this is actually fairly easy. You can take the number and rewrite it. Only this time, what we're going to do is we are going to move that decimal to the right by however many zeros are in the number we're multiplying by. So there are 2 zeros here, so we're going to move this decimal once, twice, so the decimal goes here, and that means I'm going to put a 0 here. Let's get rid of that decimal right there, and that means my answer is, whoops, sorry about that, 240 centimeters. So how many centimeters are in 2 and 4/10 meters? 240. And again, you could have just used a calculator, and that's perfectly fine for this, okay? But just in case, you wanted to try to practice it on your own, that's fine too. All right, so let's try another one. So let's use a different unit this time, a different measurement, and let's say we're going to have 5,629 milliliters. And now the important thing is that what I'm showing you works no matter whether you're using liters, grams, or meters. It's all about the prefix. Okay, that's the most important part, actually. All right, so now we've got 5,629 milliliters, and I want to know how many liters that is. Okay, so in a way, this time we're going the opposite direction. This time we're going from milliliters to liters. Now, remember what I said. The first thing we got to think about is, are we going to be multiplying or dividing? So I have my number, 5,629, and I needed to find out if I'm going to multiply or divide. Well, I use the visual exercise, the visualization exercise of the box with the pieces in it for the last time. Only that time we had the big boxes with all the pieces in it, and we were taking those pieces out and counting them. This time we have the pieces and we're putting them into the box. So we've got 5,629 pieces, and we're going to be putting them into boxes. All right, so we're breaking up that big number into boxes. And how many are going to go in a box? Well, a milliliter is 1/1000th of a liter, so that means each liter is going to contain 1,000 milliliters. So each box is going to be 1,000. Now, if we're taking that big number and breaking it up into big groups equally, that's, of course, division. And then what are we dividing by? Well, how many milliliters are in a liter? Well, 1,000. How many of those pieces go into each box? 1,000. All right, and again, you can use your calculator for this. That's perfectly fine. But if you didn't want to use your calculator, you do it very similarly to the way we did it before. Only the last time, the decimal went to the right. So of this time, since we're doing the opposite of multiplication, the decimal is going to go in a different direction. Now, as you'll see, there is no decimal here that you can see, but whenever we have a whole number, we always say that the decimal is right there at the end. So I'm just going to put one right there. And then now we're going to move it. Well, how many spaces are we going to move it? Well, how many zeros do we have here? We got 3. 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to move it once, twice, 3 times, and it's going to end up there. Let me go ahead and do my little eraser thing. And then, boom, there we go. And if you could check this on a calculator. So my answer becomes 5. Oops, did that again. 5 and 629 thousandths. All right. Now, my last example is going to show kind of a special case that you're going to run into. Now, you won't run, at least not this year, you won't run into this with liters or with grams, but you will run into this with meters and having to convert between centimeters and millimeters. And it's easy with the other ones because there is a set, either multiple or fraction of, okay, a kilometer is 1,000 of meters, 1,000 meters, or a millimeter is 1/1000th of a meter. But it's kind of harder to tell between all the other measurements, like millimeters and centimeters. So to figure this one out, let's go back to our chart right here. So again, the first thing we gotta figure out is, are we multiplying or are we dividing? Well, we're starting with millimeters and we are turning it into centimeters. Now, if you watched the last example, which of course you should have because it was on this video, you'll see that if we're going from a smaller unit to a bigger unit, that is going to be division, okay? Because we've got smaller pieces, we're putting them into a bigger container, putting the equal amounts into larger containers. So we're taking all the small pieces and putting them away. So that means we're dividing up the small pieces into equal groups. So that is division, okay? So that's 729 divided by what? Now, that's where things get a little interesting, okay? So now, think of it, look at the two numbers that we've got here. We've got 1 over 100, and we've got 1 over 1,000. And I'm going to throw a big word out at you that you don't need to know, but it has everything to do with what you're going to be doing next. It's called magnitude. It's about how much greater something is than one number is than another, and it's usually used with tens. For example, 100 is a magnitude larger than 10. 1,000 is a magnitude larger than 1,000. So how much bigger is 1,000 than 100? Or how much smaller is 100 than 1,000? That's what you want to be thinking about. And the answer, of course, is whether you're multiplying or dividing, going in which way. 10. If I multiply 100 by 10, I get 1,000. Or if I divide 1,000 by 10, I get 100. So that is why we always say that 1 centimeter equals 10 millimeters. And if I had a ruler to show you, you could actually see the 10 little lines in a centimeter. Those are all millimeters. So there's 10 in each centimeter. So that means we're going to be dividing by 10. And again, like I said before, you can use your calculator for this, or we can go ahead and try to do it with our pen. And remember, if we're dividing, that means our number is going to, our decimal, which is right here right now, is going to go to the left. And by how many? Well, we've only got 1 0, so that means only one place. And then that means it's going to go right there. Let me erase the little bit right there. Okay. And there we get our answer, 72 and 9/10. And I hope this is a pretty good, hope this helps as far as helping you understand how the metric system prefixes work, how they're all compared to each other, and how to convert between them. Come back and watch this video as many times as you need to help you with this. All right. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye-bye.